So with that, my name is Reva Chambliss. I'm Vice Chair of the Transportation Meeting, and today is Monday, August 23rd. I will be chairing this meeting in the absence of Deb Barber, our Transportation Chair. Before we get started, I should mention that because of COVID-19, it has caused us to alter our meeting procedures, and the Metropolitan Council Chair has determined that it is not practical or prudent to conduct in-person meetings due to the pandemic. The Metropolitan Council and its committee and advisory committees will conduct meetings in accordance with Minnesota statutes, section 13D.021, and members will participate by telephone or other electronic means. The public is encouraged to monitor this meeting remotely via our website and YouTube. The public may also submit comments to public.info@metc.state.mn.us, and we will respond promptly. Because we are conducting the meeting electronically, all votes must be taken by roll call, and when we do so, Becky will call the roll in alphabetical order. I and other council members and the public who may be monitoring the meeting must be able to hear your vote. When your name is called for each vote, please state clearly yea or nay or abstain, and so I can determine whether a majority of votes voted in favor of the motion. And because we need to establish a quorum for this call, I'd like to ask Becky if you can call the roll.
Cummings.
Here.
Ferguson.
Here.
Fredson.
Here.
Gonzalez. Sterner.
Here.
Zirin.
Zirin is present.
Barber. Chambliss.
Here. So it looks like we have a quorum, and we can proceed with our meeting. Normally, we would have approval of the agenda. Unless there are any changes needed, we will not need to do a roll call for that. And I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
This is Sterner. I'd make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Sterner. Is there a second? Is there a second on the minutes? Somebody muted?
Coming second.
Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? The minutes are approved.
Chair Chambliss. I'll call the roll.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez. Sterner.
Aye.
Zirin.
Zirin's aye.
Barber. Chambliss.
Aye. Thank you. With that, the minutes are approved. Let's go to our agenda. And at this point, we have a report by Mr. Dugan of the TAB.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. And also good afternoon to you honorable members of the committee and General Manager Koistra, Acting Director Venowitz. And of course, thank you, Becky, for getting all this organized. A brief report today, which I'm sure you'll be sad to hear, but it will be brief. We can get you out of here early. There's only one action item that is coming from the TAB to you, and that will come on September 13th. And it's the public comment report for the Transportation Improvement Plan, the TIP. And also the main item of business at TAB last week was the update on the regional solicitation, which Steve Peterson will present to you as information item number 3 today. The TAB chair also wished to relay that due to the regional solicitation deadline for the new application and work of this fall, we are having TAB is having an extra executive committee meeting and an early start in September. From MnDOT, the MnPass lanes on 35W have become easy pass lanes. On 35W, that includes 35W, 35E, and 394. Easy Pass means that it connects the Minnesota Express system to 19 other states in the Midwest and East Coast. And for the rush hours of 6 to 10 a.m. and 3 to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, buses, motorcycles, and vehicles with 2 or more riders can travel free for no charge on the Easy Pass. The TED grants from MnDOT are out for solicitation. These are called the Transportation Economic Development Grants. They started in 2010, and to be eligible, there must be measurable impact and job creation, or measurable economic impact and job creation. MnDOT supplies up to 70% of the cost. There is the MnDOT program specifies or targets state highways. There is a parallel program that DEED runs called the TED infrastructure, so the TEDI, the TEDI grants, and those are for local roads and other types of transportation. From the MPCA, school bus replacement, school bus update and replacement solicitation is open, and this applies this time for non-electric vehicles, and it covers propane, diesel, and gas-powered buses. The off-road RFP will come this fall, and Minnesota, as you know, adopted the Clean Car Standards rule, and that applies to model years 2025. From the MAC, and this will be a little bit more lengthy, but if it's okay with you, all of you, I like to include this because it can be the type of thing that you may get asked by a constituent because it affects them every day in their lives. As I'm sure you know, the TSA extended the mask mandate at airports and on airlines through January 18th. It was due to expire September 14th. The testing and vaccination sites at the airport are still open and operating. General passenger levels are down are at 65% of 2019. TSA checkpoints are now regularly above 60% of pre-COVID check-ins, and only 31 routes remain suspended, down from 105 in May of 2020. In July, airlines out of MSP flew 1.6 million seats. This time last year, it was 950,000. And in July of 2019, it was 2.1 million. And good news, and that's good news, but Delta's added service to Cancun, Calgary, Amsterdam, Mexico City, Iceland, and Paris. And Air Paris and Iceland Air will be coming to Minneapolis, started coming to Minneapolis in June. They expect additional service from KLM and Air Canada, and Delta this fall will be adding service to London, Seoul, and Tokyo. Aer Lingus, the Irish airline, will not restart Dublin service in 2021. Condor, the Frankfurt, Germany-based airline, has resumed flights to their main hub, Frankfurt. And domestically, MSP, much to its credit, has added 25 seasonal or year-round routes from 5 airlines. And Allegiant is becoming the 18th airline to serve MSP, and they'll be going to North Carolina and Florida. And the valet garage on Terminal 1 is open. And that is important to MAC because it provides much of the operating income for the airport. And so far, parking revenue is down 60%. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. Dugan. I'm really happy to see that we have the support for the Easy Pass, and that is also helping to connect us around the nation. That's great. And then good to see that travel demand is up as well with the more trips.
Yes.
Thank you for your report.
Chair.
Any questions from Mr. Dugan? If there are no questions, thank you, Mr. Dugan. We will go on to the Metropolitan Transportation Services Director and report.
Madam Chair, I will pass. Nothing of significance to bring to your attention today. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. General Manager report.
Yes, Madam Chair. Brief report. First, regarding COVID, that COVID continues to be a primary focus of Metro Transit. Now, since the start of the pandemic, we've had 487 total cases among Metro Transit employees. In recent months, in June, we had 2 cases total. In July, we had 4 cases total. And just since our August 9th meeting, however, we've had 23 cases. So we are really mirroring what's going on in the state, and certainly concerned about this and watching the impact of the Delta variant on our employees and on our services. Last week, the regional administrator announced that beginning till October 11th, Metropolitan Council employees must be vaccinated or submit to weekly testing. The COVID Incident Command Team is working to operationalize this new requirement. But I will say, with over 3,000 employees at Metro Transit alone, this is going to be a huge undertaking for us. We have had a number of challenges throughout the COVID period that we have taken on and addressed, and this will be yet another one, and I have confidence that we'll make this work. I'll also mention the federal mask mandate for public transit was extended. Peter mentioned that as it applies to airlines, but that also applies to public transit. Initially, a federal mask mandate public transit was set to expire in September, and as was mentioned, it's now extended into January of 2022. We recently refreshed our onboard messages that remind customers they must wear masks while riding transit as one more step to ensure compliance. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that report. Are there any questions? Hearing no questions, we will wrap up our transportation services reports and move on to our business. As it stands, we have no items that are on consent, so we will proceed to the 4 non-consent items that we have. And the first one is 2021-201 regarding Metro Transit uniforms. I believe we have Steve McLaird, who is going to give us a report on that before we do a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Thank you. This is a business item is number 2021-201. This is an item that was presented at the July 26th meeting, and it was tabled for more discussion. Just some background on it. So this is the Metro Transit uniform contract. And what we're asking for is the council to authorize the regional administrator to award and execute the contract with Galls to supply the uniform items for our bus operators, rail operators, and the other represented employees, not to exceed $3,750,000 for the 5-year period of the contract. As a background, this is the uniform contract for primarily the bus operators. We have about 1,500 bus operators. So the largest items purchased are obviously the shirts and pants and jackets. None of the items are expected to change in this contract. We have some price lock guarantees for the 5-year period. We put the request for proposals out on May 18th of 2021. And proposals were due and received on June 15th and then went through our internal evaluation process. And the questions, I believe, at the last meeting were regarding the DBE percentages and participation. And we have had more discussion with this particular vendor. And I'd like to have Jody speak a little bit if she could.
Madam Chair and committee members, my name is Jody Jacoby, and I'm the director of the procurement department. And as Steve mentioned, the procurement agent who was assigned to this project had an opportunity to connect with Galls to talk to them about the council's interest in subcontracting some of this work to targeted vendors. And they indicated that they are more than willing to work with the council staff to incorporate some MCUB subcontracting options into this contract. And from the Office of Equal Opportunity, Elaine Ogilvie, who's the Small Business Program Supervisor, provided a list of MCUBs from the directory, which we then turned over to Gaulis. And following execution, if this contract is executed, they mentioned that they will specifically work with the council and council staff to have some subcontracting, including screen printing, embroidery, and alterations. Additionally, they mentioned with some of their other contracts with public agencies, they have staff at physical sites. And so they have expressed an interest in looking at some subcontracting, even with no goal being assigned. I'll turn it back over to Steve.
Okay, thank you. With that, I would open it up to any questions.
Are there any questions?
Madam Chair, this is Councilmember Zirin.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, my question is around, we have agreements with our ATU operators, provide them with these uniforms. Are we in jeopardy of maybe having a grievance or not fulfilling that agreement going forward? That's why I felt strongly to vote no on tabling this the last time that this came to the committee. I'm concerned about having things delivered in a timely manner. Can we speak towards that?
Madam Chair, I can answer the question.
Sure.
Well, this contract originally ended last December, and we extended the contract due to COVID and due to getting more specificity into the contract. And it's been extended to the end of September. We do have contractual obligations with ATU, but we also have contractual obligations with TMSA to provide the uniforms. So we're coming up to the end of the September date. And what September means is we've already exercised the extension, the 10%. So we're at our contractual limit, and we're also at the money limit of the current contract and purchase orders that we have. So going forward, October, November, December obviously are the heaviest months for uniform purchasing. And that's where we're going to see our largest share of uniforms go out the door. The second thing is we are very aggressively trying to hire bus operators, and it's very important that the bus operators have a uniform when they step on the bus. So hopefully in the next, I think we have probably approximately 30 people in the instruction center right now that are needing uniforms in the near future. And if we can, we'll be looking for 50 to 75 more, hopefully by the end of the year. So a delay in the uniforms causes an issue there. If this is not approved, we'll have to find some alternatives, but it does disrupt, and we are obligated by the contract to provide these items.
Any further questions? Thank you for that response.
Madam Chair, I would like to move the business item 2021-201 for Metro Transit uniform contract.
Okay. That motion has been made. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, this is Rep. Sterner, and I would make a second on that.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. Are there any discussion items? Any discussion items? Okay, if not, let's call the roll.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez, Sterner,
Aye.
Zirin,
Zirin's aye.
Barber, Chambliss.
Aye. And with that, this motion has been approved and we have a contract. I'm very happy that the contractor was amenable to some of our suggestions and is willing to work with our MCUB participants. So we will move on to the next item.
Chair Chambliss, can you be sure that that gets put on, not on the consent agenda for council, but on the regular agenda, please?
I will sure do that. Let's see. Okay, so going on to the next item, 2021-209, Metro Purple Line BRT, Historic Preservation Section Memorandum of Agreement. We've got Chelsea and Charles. Or Chelsea.
Thank you. It's Chelsea. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Chelsea Johnson, and I am the environmental lead for the Purple Line BRT project. I knew I was going to say Gold Line because I also work on that project too. The proposed business item number 2021-209 is to authorize the regional administrator to execute the Metro Purple Line BRT Historic Preservation, which I will also refer to as Section 106, Memorandum of Agreement. The Purple Line project is advancing under FTA's Capital Investment Grant Program and may receive federal funding. Therefore, it must comply with the National Environmental Policy Act and the requirements of Section 106 for historic properties. Both NEPA and Section 106 require the federal agency to consider the impacts or effects of their proposed project on historic properties. The Section 106 process really involves just 3 key steps. That first step is to look at and identify historic properties that may be affected by the project, and then to assess those effects as a result of the project. And the third step is really to look at ways that we can avoid, minimize, or mitigate any of those adverse effects on the properties. And, based on the anticipated effects to some historic properties for this project, the FTA, through consultation with the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Office and other consulting parties, have determined resolution of these effects require a memorandum of agreement. This agreement documents adverse effects to the properties and associated avoidance, minimization, and mitigation measures identified through formal consultation. A few examples of these measures applicable to this project include consulting party design review, implementing design requirements to conform with Section 106 design standards, as well as developing construction protection plans for properties that may need protection during construction. The consulting parties have drafted this agreement, which was included really as just a draft version in the environmental assessment that was available for public review and comment this May and June. So the final step in the process is to sign the memorandum of agreement, which marks FTA's compliance with Section 106. So the action before the committee is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute the Historic Preservation Memorandum of Agreement developed jointly between the FTA and the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Office, the Council, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and the Federal Highway Administration for the Metro Purple Line BRT. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I'll take any questions you may have on this action.
Any questions? I am not seeing any questions. So let's go ahead and see if we can take a motion and get this seconded. Is there a motion?
Chair, this is Peterson. I would move the staff recommendation.
Okay, a second. Any seconds for the motion?
Cummings
Turner, aye.
second.
Yeah, I heard Cummings seconded. Any discussion on the agreement? No discussion, so let's take a roll.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez, Sterner,
Aye.
Zieren,
Zieren's aye.
Barber, Chambliss.
Aye. With that, the motion has been seconded and it is approved. The next item on non-consent is 2021-220, Metro Purple Line Master Funding Agreement with Minnesota Department of Transportation. And it looks like we have Craig Lamont.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I have the second Purple Line item for the afternoon. This item is a subsequent item to one that the council took action on at their last meeting on August 11th, and that was for a cooperation agreement between the council and MnDOT for the Purple Line project. And that really set the stage for the relationship that the two agencies will have in delivering the project over the next 5 or so years. This subsequent agreement is a master funding agreement that speaks to how the transfer of funds will take place between the council and MnDOT when MnDOT is asked to perform activities by the council over the next several years for the benefit of the project. MnDOT staff are anticipated to play both full-time and part-time roles supporting the council in the delivery of the Purple Line project. Subsequent agreements will come before this body and the full council that speak specifically to those activities and the funds to compensate MnDOT for those activities. Those subordinate funding agreements are in development and will be coming later this fall. So this specific action is requesting that the Transportation Committee recommend to the council to authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute the master funding agreement with the Minnesota Department of Transportation for the Metro Purple Line. And I'd be happy to answer any questions the body may have.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions? Looks like there are no questions. Is there a motion to accept this funding agreement?
Chair, it's Fredson. I will move the staff recommendation.
A second? Is there a second?
I would second that, Madam Chair. This is Sterner.
Thank you. The motion has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez. Sterner.
Aye.
Zirin.
Zieren's aye.
Barber. Chambliss.
Aye. The motion has been seconded and approved. Next, we have 2021-216, Southwest Light Rail Transit, the Green Line Extension, and we're talking about the Kimley Horn Contract Amendment number 2 for Construction Management Support Services. And it looks like we have Jim Alexander here.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. This is Jim Alexander, Project Director with Southwest LRT. Tonight I have the an amendment number 2 for the Construction Management Support Services contract. This contract, we originally got it in place in September of 2017. That was before our actual construction started. This started early because we thought we were going to get into civil construction, and that was delayed for a number of reasons back in 2017, 2018. And so we originally had a contract amount of 8.5 million. And this entity helps support us in the field, as well as on scheduling and looking at costs, change orders, as we look at the civil and systems contracts for Southwest LRT. We've also added some additional support to help us with the rebaselining of the schedule that I've talked about for civil and systems, the rescheduling of those 2 contracts. So tonight I have an amendment consideration for you to add $5.5 million to the original contract, which would amount to a total of $14 million. And Madam Chair, council members, the action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute amendment number 2 to contract 17P060 with Kimley Horn and Associates for construction management support services to add $5.5 million for a total contract amount of $14 million. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Certainly. Are there any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to accept this contract agreement?
Cummings moves approval.
Is there a second?
Fredson, I'll second.
Okay, a motion by Cummings, Fredson seconded. Any discussion? Looks like we have no discussion, so we will take a roll call.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez, Sterner,
Aye.
Zirin,
Zarin's aye.
Barber, Chambliss.
Aye. Thank you. That motion has been approved, and that is the end of our non-consent items. I would like to recommend that we move item number 2 and number 3 to consent. It's been suggested that we move item number 1 to non-consent, and I'll recommend that number 4 also goes on non-consent. Any questions or concerns regarding that? Great. So let's move on to our information items. Brian Funk is here to talk to us about Metro Transit operations.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Able to hear me okay?
Certainly.
All right, I think Greg is going to pull up the slides here and then we will get started. All right, thank you everybody. I'm really happy to be here. Again, good afternoon. My name is Brian Funk and I'm the Acting Chief Operating Officer for Metro Transit. Today I'm going to provide you with an update of the operations divisions here at Metro Transit. And you know, bus operators are often the face of our organization, and the 3 smiles you see here are great ambassadors for the agency. From left to right, we have Abdul Razik and Malika from the Martin Reuter Garage, as well as Fasil from our South Garage. They each volunteered to be part of our new marketing campaign, which is really targeting the personality behind the uniform. And we're happy that they participated, and as well as everyone else who's jumping into that for this fall. Next slide, please. As this slide illustrates, despite impacts from the pandemic, Metro Transit remains a large operation. More than 2/3 of Metro Transit's employees work within the operations divisions. And I have to say, I'm amazed by the work that's done each day. I've been here for more than 19 years, but every day there's miracles that happen to ensure our service is delivered on the street or on the tracks. More than 900 buses and trains head out for service each day, and happy to say that we're back delivering more than 100,000 rides each weekday. In addition, our operators driving the buses and trains have delivered on-time performance at very high levels, as you can see in the pie charts below. And our maintenance teams have ensured that we have exceptional reliability with meeting our miles between service calls, which is a key metric for ensuring our vehicles are there as promised. There's a link here to even more facts behind the numbers, but I just wanted to give you a brief overview of that. Next slide, please. Before we go too deep into the current status, it's worth mentioning, of course, the state fair starts this Thursday, and so I'll provide a little bit of an update. As you can see across the top, masks are required on transit. The general manager made sure everyone was reminded that masks are going to be required at least until January of next year, and so we will have masks available for anyone riding the state fair, but if people want to bring their own, we'll appreciate that as well. During our current due to our current staffing levels, we've made a well-covered decision to reduce the state fair express service so that we're able to maintain our focus on regular routes. It's not fair to anyone if we have to choose one or the other with limited resources. And much like many providers, especially in our industry, we simply do not have extra operators to be able to provide as much service as we would like to during the 12 days of the fair. And so where we landed was 3 sites on all 12 days, 9 to midnight on weekdays and 8 to midnight on the weekends. We used a balance of prior demand as well as geography to select those locations. In the end, we ended up choosing 28th Avenue Park and Ride in Bloomington, the County Road 73 and 394 Park and Ride in Minnetonka, and the Cottage Grove Park and Ride. Our shuttle service, combined with the shuttle service offered directly by the state fair, which is generally north and east of the fairgrounds, serves to provide a pretty good balance geographically. And again, if we could do more, we would, but we're making the best of the current situation. In addition, we are going to have one of our highly successful mobile vaccination buses on site daily to help promote the vaccination clinic in the North End Event Center, which will be open each of the 12 days from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., with the exception of Labor Day closing at 8 p.m. Since March, our teams and the vaccination buses have traversed the state and participated in more than 200 clinics. I can honestly say this has been one of the most rewarding partnerships of my career, and I'm extremely proud of both the maintenance and operations teams who have made that happen since we first got going this spring. We are continuing to market and promote all of the transit operations to the state fair, both our operations as well as suburban providers, our regular route service, as well as the free park and ride lots that I mentioned. The express park and ride site promotion is being dialed back, of course, for obvious reasons. And we're putting more focus on the regular route service that exists, including the Route 3, which has improved service starting today, as well as the Route 84 and A line right over on Snelling Avenue. Customers are going to be encouraged to use the mobile app to pay for their express or regular route ride. The express riders pay only $5 if they use one of the digital versions versus $6 if they arrive with cash at one of the sites. And finally, our teams will be on site in 2 locations at the fairgrounds. The longstanding grandstand booth will be staffed to provide route and schedule information. And then in the eco experience, we will continue to maintain a presence in partnership with MnDOT to provide information about sustainable transportation options. Next slide, please. The general manager covered a few of these facts, but I'll just give a quick recap as well, because the last 18 months has been challenging from a COVID management perspective. As the general manager noted, we've had an increase in cases since June and July, and even this slide became outdated from the middle of last week. And so we do stand with 487 confirmed cases, and we've seen quite a spike like others due to the Delta variant. Our managers and supervisors continue to work with employees and conduct rigorous contact tracing, following the latest guidance to ensure that our workplaces are safe and also to ensure that leave time is managed in coordination with human resources and that employees are both respected and cared for when they're dealing with this challenge. The TSA and FTA continue the federal mask mandate, as been previously mentioned. And back in early August, when Council Incident Command recognized this Delta variant being a real threat, we reinstituted mask requirements for all indoor work locations. Vaccines are continuing to be available to all employees, and we've tried to make that as easy as possible. Each Monday and Thursday, vaccine appointments are available through both of our Well at Work clinics. And as the general manager also announced last week, a new program has been announced. October 11th, all employees will be required to document proof of either full vaccination or be subject to weekly COVID tests and test negative, of course, before reporting for on-site work. Right now, the Council Incident Command team has stood up, developing procedures for securely collecting this information, and then also the process and documentation requirements for those weekly tests. As you may have heard, the Pfizer vaccine was approved earlier today, and we're continuing to promote all opportunities to our employees. Happy to say that personal protective equipment, including masks, hand and surface sanitizer, and others remain readily available to employees. We're well stocked into the fall. Jody's team and the Metro Transit Materials Management team have the supplies we need, and we're ensuring that those get into the hands of everybody working on site each day. We never slowed down with our enhanced cleaning, both in our facilities as well as the daily bus and train disinfecting. And I'm happy to say that we signed on very early to the APTA commitments program and are continuing to inform and document the industry best practices. For example, to date, we have disinfected more than 150,000 buses in 2021 and more than 350,000 buses since March of 2020. I can remember a very early March day in 2020 thinking, what's going to happen if we end up having to fog or disinfect our buses? I never thought that we'd still be doing it, but thank goodness for the hardworking teams who make that happen day in and day out. We continue to look forward. We're testing 3 technologies on buses right now that may prove to be beneficial for the COVID virus, but also for other germs that are introduced onto the buses. So think about your standard cold and flu viruses. These are things that we need to ensure have the ability to withstand the sort of hard duty cycle that's introduced in a mobile unit as opposed to being placed into an office location. And so we'll continue to evaluate and make investments where appropriate. And finally, as shown in the picture here, our rail maintenance teams, as well as the bus teams, have upgraded onboard air filters for all of the light rail vehicles, the North Star passenger cars, and as I mentioned, the buses to the highest MERV levels available that are still able to allow airflow so that our HVAC systems can function properly. Next slide, please. On to staffing. Just a couple of our key positions identified here. With the service changes over the last weekend, with our bus operators, we're actually 66 operators below our ideal. And so what we would like to have is a little over 1,200 full and part-time weekday employees, but we're not there right now. As Steve mentioned, we have more than a couple dozen in training, more who are at various stages of the hiring process. We've continued really to work hard on making it easy and looking at our processes. And so just in the last week, 2 hiring events have been held, resulting in more than 24 completed interviews. And we're really excited to ensure that people are able to follow through to get the materials needed to be able to start with us. And then we're looking to start people into those full-time roles as soon as possible. The picture to the right is a father-son duo who started with us in training, German Gonzalez Sr. and Jr. And you know, it's really exciting to have people from all backgrounds coming in to join the organization, especially when you can find a family relationship such as this. On the train operator front, we are staffed at full levels right now. That's because we transfer bus operators to be train operators. And so we have people in training right now. We're exploring other pathways into that train operator role. And finally, on the technician side of the house, we continue to be staffed at adequate levels, but we're actively recruiting for those positions. And as I'll show on the next slide, we're working to build the workforce of the future in-house. So we have multiple pathways into what is a great career. Next slide, please. All right, workforce development. This is an organization that invests in its employees. I've personally benefited from workforce development programs, and I feel like we're really hitting our stride for keeping programs fresh and meaningful. We have multiple technician training programs, as outlined here, in development, which build on successful programs that we've tried over the last several years, while focusing much of our instruction in-house. And so in addition to our bus maintenance technician training program that's partially funded thanks to the council by an equity grant, we're also in the process of building a rail technician training program for both vehicle maintenance as well as traction power maintenance positions. And we're really looking to follow an apprenticeship model for all of these positions because we believe through our bus operator training program that pays off dividends, especially in the long run and with the cooperation between both management, the union, and all employees involved. We're starting or restarting our popular Leadership Academy program, which looks to provide frontline staff with instruction and leadership training, as well as a 6-month on-the-job experience into a frontline supervisory or management role. This is a partnership with ATU and TMSA, and we've had great results over the last approximately 8 years. Likewise, as we look to build towards the future, we're also eyeing up a program that would create a pathway for a train operator to rail supervisor on the job experience. The rail supervisor position encompasses both the rail control center as well as the field aspects, and we think that it would be prudent to make an investment into current train operators who are interested in moving forward but might not meet the minimum requirements that this could satisfy. A couple more things for bus operators. We are continuing our well-respected and second in the nation bus operator apprenticeship program, something that no other driving company can provide, especially locally. We're expanding that from a 12-month to an 18-month program to allow for additional mentoring and training opportunities. And then we're continuing our Red Kite resiliency training. This has been a program that has really started to pay dividends over the last couple of years. It's an intensive program, but we think really hits the mark for employees who are out working with the public in all sorts of circumstances, day and night, 365 days a year. And finally, we've made investments and will continue to invest in the group on the right, who comprise our newest garage instructors. These folks are really the front lines at each of our 5 garages to ensure that our bus operators always have kind of that steady hand, can provide ongoing training, ride-alongs, route training, good advice, and really just a key trusted resource for any questions that come up so that they can do their job best as possible. Next slide. And 2 more slides about now we're moving to vehicles. On the light rail side, as I mentioned in a prior Transportation Committee presentation, all but 1 light rail vehicle have had the seats replaced, and so we're really excited about that. The Hitachi camera system for live streaming has been both reliable and beneficial for operations and transit police. And finally, quick update on the overhaul program. Our Type 1 fleet, which were originally purchased for the Hiawatha/Blue Line opening and include 27 vehicles, the second overhaul was completed in Q4 of 2020. That overhaul was focused on the braking and suspension systems, the traction motor and gearbox overhaul. Type 2 and 2.5 that were purchased with the Green Line launch, which includes 64 vehicles, was started in Q4 of 2019. We've completed about 65% of the fleet to date. Should be done with the rest of the fleet by next March. That scope is focused heavily on braking and primary suspension, and we're already planning on looking forward for additional overhaul projects, including rust mitigation. On the bus side, we have installed about almost 600 Bentech security shields for our bus operators following a successful labor management working group that started after the last contract was signed in early 2018. And those shields are being included as standard equipment on all new purchases. This year, we're looking to install additional camera upgrades on our vehicles, our bus vehicles, to match what the light rail security cameras can do, which is that live look-in feature when there are security incidents reported, so that both our operations and police staff have the ability for live monitoring during calls for assistance. And finally, our buses, like trains, also undergo midlife overhauls. Since the start of 2021, 47 buses have had their midlife and repaints completed, which includes replacing all of the lower panels, the mirrors. We sand paint the front and back sides below the windows, refresh the decals and glass as needed, and then repair body damage, corrosion, do an in-depth ramp inspection, and then also replace floor and exterior lighting. So this is part of maintaining our assets and ensuring that each one is able to meet that at least 12-year minimum life. Next slide. And finally, in addition to keeping in good repair our current equipment, our teams are also working hand in hand with the procurement department on new vehicles. And so as we announced earlier this year, we're right now preparing to establish the contract and expect delivery in early 2023 of 8 40-foot battery electric buses from Proterra. We also have 6 40-foot BRT buses to replace the Red Line fleet, which have made line entry through Gillig and are planned for delivery starting early in September. 16 of our 60-foot BRT buses for Orange Line and eventually D Line have arrived, and it assures us that we will have a full brand new ready fleet for Orange Line later this year. And finally, 21 of the new Type 3 light rail vehicles are now on site, and we have 2 additional arrivals being brought into the facility later this week. We're working through conditional acceptance testing and punch list items on the first 8, and then the plan will be to introduce those to revenue service so that we're able to start using them within their warranty period and ensure that we have enough fleet available during the major overhauls for previously mentioned existing light rail vehicles. Next slide. And with that, I just want to say on behalf of everyone in operations, thank you for providing the time and attention today, and I'll be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you so much. Any questions?
Yes, Chair, I have a few questions.
Go ahead, please.
All right, thank you. The first one I had is I've talked to some operators that used to work with Metropolitan Transportation, and they were let go for some few issues, but they were accommodated drivers. Is there a possibility you would rehire drivers that used to work for Metropolitan Council as in our pool?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Cerner, I would say that at this point, I would encourage people to apply, and typically rehires, depending on the reason for separation, are evaluated on a case-by-case basis, but I would definitely encourage people to apply so we can have that evaluation and conversation.
Can I have a couple of follow-up questions too, Chair Chambliss?
Certainly.
All right, thank you. And I was also wondering, what do we do to retain our drivers? Do we have an ongoing training program, not just when they start, but do they get so many hours of training, and we work with the drivers to see how everything's going with them and encourage them to stay on with our team?
Right. Madam Chair and Councilmember Sterner, I'm glad you brought that up. Those are two additional initiatives that we've had in place, a variety of ongoing training, including professional operator development, which is an annual training focused on kind of specific items. This last winter and spring, it had to transition to a virtual event, but that was focused on mental health awareness, recognizing, for example, people who may be in crisis and how to respond and react to that in the best way possible. We've also incorporated additional technical training to those types of trainings. The red kite training I mentioned, as well as defensive driver safety keys, are two other areas. Plus, we really try to provide outlets for people to be involved with their own development as well as helping others. And so two additional outlets include our peer support program, where people are operators and other frontline staff are able to receive specialized training and then serve as a peer support following a critical incident or traumatic event, as well as being involved in committees like our Transit Safety and Security Committee. And so we think that that level of engagement and continuing to build on that is something that is hard to find in other locations, and is something that can help us with retention.
Thank you. And I just had one more question, Chair Chambliss. My other question has to do with the vehicles and kind of reducing our carbon footprint with the state initiative to reduce it. Are we looking for other options than diesel buses in our next purchases? And are we like in focus groups and working with the different manufacturers that to come up with some other solutions other than diesel buses?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Sterner, another great topic. Thank you for bringing that up. And that is something we're actively working on right now. And as you may recall, earlier this spring, the council approved a series of work orders, which includes a zero emission bus transition plan. And so staff with consultants and other interested stakeholders have really started to work hard on that over the last couple of weeks. What that will do will help to inform the types of technology, the applications, the guiding principles we're using for where they will be dedicated, and then also how much it's going to cost and what sort of funding decisions we need to make through our capital budgeting process. What are the other opportunities that exist in the near term and longer term, depending on what happens with the federal infrastructure bill, for example. And so we're really working hard to include what is a lot of different moving pieces into a succinct plan, so that by the end of this year, and certainly by the state required deadline in February, we'll be able to have that plan ready for additional review. And that's what's going to help us inform, really what are the types of vehicles that we purchase, not just in 2022, but 23, 24, 25, and so on.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Funk, and thank you, Chair Chambliss. I'm complete. Thanks.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions?
Chair Chambliss, this is Councilmember Raymond Zarin. I have a question.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Funk, I'm wondering about our 8 electric buses. Are they all in service? And are our charging systems now operational? And expand on what we've done. What's the status there?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Zirin, I am sad to say that we are now rapidly approaching 6 months since those buses were sidelined. We do not yet have replacement chargers installed at our facility. They continue to undergo the factory acceptance testing and review. We've made a strong commitment to not accept chargers until we know that they're ready for the service that we need to put them through. As of yet, we haven't quite crossed that finish line, but we'll certainly keep the council posted, and we're really eager. It's disappointing to have lost 6 months of experience, especially knowing that this is the direction that we really would like to see ourselves go, and we're all up for a challenge and we want to push hard, but it's really difficult without that operational equipment. So I think I can work with Nick Thompson's group and Carrie Desmond, who's been here before, maybe to provide another summary update on the current status.
I would appreciate that.
Good questions. Any others? Okay, our next information item is the 2021 second quarter ridership report.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm John Harper. I'm manager of contracted transit service in MTS. I'm here today to present to you the second quarter ridership, 2021 second quarter ridership report. And be aware that this is Met Council's ridership. This is not a regional picture. This is just the ridership for the agency. And every quarter, Eric Lind and I, traditionally in the last couple of years, have presented. Today, we're going to just be a very brief presentation, and it will be just me presenting to you today. And so we'll get to it here and make it a short presentation. Next slide, please. Just to set the stage, this graph here shows the last 18 months of ridership, and just want to refresh your memory on some things that are certainly top of mind for us all, but just to put them on the record here for this presentation, and that is to identify that our reaction to COVID, or the COVID pandemic, really began in earnest at the end of March last year. And you can see the 2020 line drops precipitously between March ridership and April ridership. We did have a system shut down in the wake of George Floyd's murder in second quarter of last year, and you can see the impact there in the May-June timeframe. And so this presentation is the first presentation where we will get a real snapshot of a COVID to COVID comparison. So you'll just see a few slides here. We start with a year-to-date comparison, and then we'll go into a quarter two comparison. We can go to the next slide. One item I want to bring to your attention here that isn't on any of the slides is comparing quarter one of this year to quarter two of this year. And we've gone up from the quarterly ridership overall of about 7.6 million rides in quarter one to 8.3 million rides in quarter two, which is a 10% increase. And so you can see that on that last chart, and you'll see it here as we move through the slides. So this slide has been in each of the presentations. This just shows the breakdown of the modes and type of service that we provide, and as usual, local bus is the workhorse. Rail, light rail service is the second largest chunk of our ridership, and at this point, BRT is the third largest chunk, and for reasons that we all understand, commuter and express has a much smaller impact in our world in 2021 than it did in the first portion of 2020. So next slide, please. This is year to date, so this includes quarter one and quarter two, and this really shows some of the changes that Eric Lind and I have talked about over the over the last few presentations, and that is when you look year to date from 2020 to 2021, there is a reduction in ridership, and that's because the first quarter of last year did not have COVID impact, whereas COVID has impacted the entire year this year. And you can see those numbers here. So next slide, please. When you compare just quarter two, the picture is a bit different. We can see that from the depths of COVID in quarter two of last year to the quarter two numbers this year, we are beginning to make our way back. And as I mentioned earlier, we're up 10% from Q1 of this year, and we are definitely up from quarter two of 2020. The one item I want to point out here is the Metro Mobility ridership. When that was reduced due to COVID, we replaced, that was down to about 50% or less, actually less than that of base. We are now up to about 90% of base when you look at the demand service. And you can see that increase here of about 150% compared 2021 to 2020. So demand is getting almost back to where it was pre-COVID in the Metro Mobility demand service. And the agency service, those rides that we provide to day training and rehabilitation, adult daycare, those agency type of rides have not come back due to a number of reasons. And that's really where we see the potential for the Metro Mobility to continue to grow, to get back to pre-COVID. So I just wanted to point that out on this slide. The picture is very good on this slide overall in all the modes, and I just wanted to point out that as one item in particular. All right, so let's move to the next slide, please. This breaks down because bus mode has 3 different service types. This breaks down that into those 3 different service types, and we are seeing rebounds in each of those 3 service areas. That's the local service, our bus rapid transit service, and our commuter and express service. So everything is on its way up compared to second quarter of 2020. So those are all good signs on where we are headed in our ridership trends. So next slide, please. Last piece of information I want to share related to the ridership is when the ridership decreased due to COVID, we had capacity in our demand response services. We wanted to retain the drivers, as Brian was just talking about with Metro Transit and driver retention and driver hiring. We were concerned a year ago or a year and a half ago with drivers, operators in the contracted environment. And so we took our capacity and filled it with some non-traditional trips. And you can see those here. We did essential workers and healthcare workers. It's really 2 different names for similar kinds of workers, taking healthcare workers and others to jobs that they, frontline jobs that they had to be at. We did food shelf delivery and grocery delivery, and you can see those trends here. I want to just mention that the healthcare worker, which is primarily a Metro Mobility program, ended as of just this past weekend because our demand, as I mentioned, is up enough that we want to continue to provide the quality service to our core ridership. And so, and also as our regular route service is being reinstated, we curtail that program. So next slide will show some of the key takeaways for this quarter. And so just very briefly, as I mentioned, last year's quarter 2 was the lowest ridership of the pandemic, and we've been building our way back since that time. We talked about the murder of George Floyd having an impact in the May-June timeframe. The near-term dynamics, we had passenger limits on buses. We lifted that in May. The federal mask mandate has been extended. That was initially slated to expire in September, and that has now been extended through January of 2022. We are moving into a fair discount time period in September and fourth quarter of this year, as has been presented in previous meetings of this committee. And there are some uncertainties as well around where we're headed within COVID. So those are just some things that we keep our eye on. Eric Lind would talk more about those if he was here, but those are just things that the analytics and research folks are looking at, continuing to think about ways to build our Ridership Act, making sure that we're sensitive to the health and the safety needs of our riders as we do build our programs back to where they were pre-COVID. So that concludes my presentation, and I or others who are on this call can certainly attempt to answer questions that you may have.
Thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions from council members? Sure. Councilmember Stoner.
Yeah, Chair Chambliss, I thought the North Star numbers looked quite a bit better in that. And are there additional things we're looking to promote it, additional ridership on that, or coordinate with like maybe the Twins the last part of the season, things like that, even enhance those numbers even more?
Mr. Harper.
Sure, Madam Chair and committee member, I will certainly defer that question to any of the Metro Transit staff who are on the call. They would certainly be closer to those specific program items than I would be. Otherwise, I can certainly ask those questions and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harper. Appreciate it.
Thanks. I also had a question about how we plan to promote our local bus service. I know that, we have the dollar rides that are going on for a temporary time period. Some companies are offering, incentives or changes to their monthly bus passes. So if we could hear more about those kind of plans to get ridership up locally, that'd be great.
Okay, certainly, Madam Chair. As I mentioned, I think at your last meeting, we did Nick Yule and others presented about the dollar fare program, and that is certainly what we're doing in the near term. I can certainly have, once again, I'm not as close to the Metro Transit marketing component. I work on the contracted side, so I can certainly ask someone to get back to you on that as well.
It looks like Wes is back on.
Madam Chair, I'll just give a brief comment and maybe we can come back with additional information. But we are doing the half price passes for the fall, and we're doing, as you mentioned, the dollar a ride promotion. As we've said, we felt we were disappointed about the impact of the Delta variant when we thought there was going to be a greater return back to the office, but we felt we needed to do it anyway with respect to all those that are looking at school passes, college passes, university passes, and even those that there are still 33% of the workforce in downtown offices now who may be making decisions about parking and so forth. So we're promoting that, but I know your questions are probably more specific than that, and I'll make sure that we get back to you with more specific information.
Okay, thank you. And then once we get that information back, if we can talk about the updates from our consumers, our riders, on why they're riding with the changes that are happening and why they may be hesitant.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Chair, I think you're on mute.
Oh, we have one more item of information, and that is regional solicitation by Steve Peterson.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Steve Peterson. I work in MTS planning, and we've come to you a few times a year on this topic, and thought this was a good time to update the committee on where we're at in this 2-year cycle on the regional solicitation. So next slide, please. This is a chart of the application categories. You've probably seen this, and the 12 or so application categories that we have. Next slide, please. So maybe one of the most important slides of the presentation. So in September, a tab is going to release for public comment, Transportation Advisory Board, the applications for public comments. That also includes a federal program called the Highway Safety Improvement Program that's run by MnDOT. We have some updates to the Regional Bicycle Transportation Network and the Regional Bicycle Barriers changes. So combination of all 4 of those things will be part of the public comment release. Excuse me. We'll bring those comments back to tab in November, and then at which point we'll bring both the comments and the final approval for concurrence back to the Transportation Committee and full council. The application period will be next roughly February through April, and then project selection, which you will be part of, will be finalized in the November-December timeframe. Next slide, please. So to sum up the major changes we've been working through over the last 6 months with our various committees, we had a new unique projects application category, and Cole Hinneker spoke to you about that and at length, so we won't do too much today. We updated the equity and affordable housing criterion, and Amy will join me in a few slides to talk through that. Increased some of the points for our at-grade intersection projects called Spot Mobility and Safety to recognize the increased safety need for those project types. And we updated the pedestrian safety measure based on a Met Council study called the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan that Heidi Schallberg from our group is leading. So those are probably the big 4 changes that we went through and wanted to bring to your attention. So next slide, please. One more. And so this is, again, what Cole brought to you last time. So 2 council members were part of a work group to develop the unique project category. And that's $4 million that was set aside for what we'll call unique projects. So next slide. What we wanted to reiterate to this group is that unlike the rest of the regional solicitation, this is could be a 2-part process, an optional 2-part process, I should say, where the first part being this fall, more of a letter of interest, and then with the formal application to follow in 2022. Next slide. Those unique projects, as recommended by our work group, will be measured in these ways. Primarily, how is it innovative? Then how does it reduce adverse environmental impacts, improve racial equity, support multimodal communities, have a regional impact, and build partnerships. So those are the measures that people will be asked to respond to. Next slide, please. With this, I will ask Amy to join me and walk through some of the changes on equity and affordable housing.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'm going to go through fairly quickly about 10 slides on our equity and affordable housing. I'm going to cover how it was scored in 2020, and we did have some changes in 2020. Then some observations of what we saw both from scoring the equity and affordable housing and also what we heard from our applicants as part of the process. And then finally, I will talk about the changes we're proposing for 2022 to address some of those observations. Next slide, please. So this slide on the left shows what we call the criteria that are used to score all the applications in all the categories. And then across the top, you see the 12 application categories. So equity and affordable, at this point, equity and housing performance that we used in 2020 has a number of measures I'll go through that we use to score the applications. But in total, those measures add up to the numbers shown here. So across the roadway applications, 10% of the points are allocated to equity and housing performance. Transit, it ranges from a low of 15 up to 20% of the points. And then for the bike and pedestrian categories, 12% of the points. Next slide, please. So this next slide shows how those points or percentages were spread across actual scoring measures in 2020. So we had an engagement measure, a measure looking at benefits and impacts, a housing performance score measure, and then an affordable housing access measure, and that was a new measure in 2020. And then the points across those four measures add up to the total allocation that you just saw on the previous slide. Next slide, please. So in the past scoring, the engagement measure, we asked applicants to describe and map what we generally term the equity populations. I do want to remind members that for the purpose of the regional solicitation, the definition of equity populations is broader than definitions used in other areas at points. So the definition includes both racial and low income populations, but it also includes disabled populations, youth, and senior populations. So our applicants are asked to map and talk about populations in any of those categories, and then describe the engagement that has taken place specifically with those communities and populations and the methods that were used. Under the benefits and impacts category, we then ask the applicants to describe the benefits that the project will provide, again, specifically to those populations, and also to think about any negative impacts and specifically whether they have not mitigated those impacts. We have in the past had an opportunity to award negative points, and moving forward, we are going to propose getting rid of the negative points. And then we had bonus points awarded only on the equity scoring last year. And that I'll describe that in detail a little bit later, but those bonus points are awarded only if the applicant receives 80% of the potential points on the other measures. Under the housing measures in 2020, we had what is known as a housing performance score. We have used the housing performance score in the regional solicitation for a long time. And this is a score that is created and scored by our community development division. The housing performance score in the past has been used across other types of applications that the council awards funding under. And generally, we have in the past heard from our applicants that they do not like this score because it is somewhat out of control of the actual applicant. And it also is not specifically influenced by the transportation project itself. So that has been kind of an ongoing comment about the housing performance score. And then last year we had a new scoring measure that we added, affordable housing access. This was kind of a pilot project last year, and we asked the applicants to map and describe the locations of affordable housing within a half mile of the project. We also asked them to describe how the project might improve both access to the actual site itself of the affordable housing, but also access the residents might have to destinations such as child care centers, schools, shopping, food destinations, and work destinations. So that was a new score. It was only awarded 10 points across all of the application categories. So it was a lot of work, and we heard from our applicants that while they didn't really mind having that scoring measure for the amount of work and only 10 points, it seemed out of whack to a lot of them. Next slide, please. So in 2020, we had a new bonus point category, as I mentioned. Applicants could only receive the bonus points if they received 80% of the score on the 3 equity measures, including the negative measure. And then you got different, applicants would receive different amounts of bonus points depending on where the project was actually located. You can see in 2020, you received 25 points for projects that were located within areas of concentrated poverty with 50% people of color, 20 points for areas of concentrated poverty, 15 for census tracts where they were above the regional average, either for poverty or people of color, and then 10 points for all other geographic areas. In 2020, I do have a slight mistake on this slide. There were actually 11 projects that received the bonus points, and they were fairly well geographically distributed throughout the region. And all 10, actually, I want to correct myself again. 11 projects received the bonus points and 10 were ultimately funded. Next slide, please. So some of the observations, I've already mentioned a few of these. In general, we had a lot of low scoring projects on the equity measures. Either the applicant had not done engagement at all, or they had really just done general engagement, and they were planning on doing future engagement, but we did not provide any points for engagement that was planned into the future. We had a few projects that scored kind of in the medium range. They generally had connections between the project and the benefits that would be provided to the equity populations, but again, had not done engagement or identified specifics through the engagement process. And then we had a few high scoring projects. These are the ones that received the bonus points. Generally, engagement had occurred, they had listened to the input received, maybe something about the project had specifically changed in response to the feedback that they received in their engagement process, and had just done a good job thinking about the benefits that would be provided from the projects to the specific populations. And then, as I mentioned already, the ACP, the scoring for the housing, not the ACP, the housing performance score, applicants continued to be unhappy with the lack of connection to the specific project, and then the amount of work on the housing access score, they really thought it needed more points associated with it. Next slide, please. So I did score the applications along with 4 others, and we, after the process, got together, and some of the lessons learned from scorers is that the applications that really did the best job kind of took a storytelling approach. They talked about why this project was being proposed, who would it impact, who would it help, what was the intent of the project. They made connections between the benefits and the specific groups that they were either located near the project or that they had engaged with. And they specifically differentiated the benefits between benefits that everyone would receive and benefits that were kind of specific to the populations near the project. In general, the Safe Routes to School applicants had really kind of did the best job on these measures. They did a good job of talking about the youth and who the youth were, where they lived, and how they would benefit from the project. So we think there's lessons that could be learned specifically from those applications. Next slide, please. So for 2020, we are proposing some changes. These changes have gone through the TAB technical committees and TAB, and they are in agreement with them at this point. We are proposing to reduce the measures to 3 measures, including engagement at 30% of the points, and this would now include engaging with the residents of affordable housing located near the proposed project. The equity, population, and benefits and impacts is 40% of the points. Rather than having a specific negative points to be received, we're really just asking the scorers to think about the benefits and impacts holistically and give an appropriate score rather than giving a positive score and then a negative score. And then we are proposing to remove the housing performance score. We have worked with community development. They are in agreement with this proposal, and they themselves are phasing out the use of that score in some of their application processes. Generally, we're proposing that the points shift over to the access to affordable housing measure, which I described earlier, and that we feel that is more directly connected to the project location and the benefits that the project will provide. Next slide, please. So this is how we are proposing that those measures be split among the application categories, which are shown on the left. What you can see on the far right is that we are not proposing to change the overall weighting of this category. It remains at what you saw for 2020, but we are spreading the points now across 3 measures instead of 4 and shifting the points around a little bit. Next slide. And then the final change we are proposing is that now the bonus points will remain, but that the bonus point scoring will apply to all 3 measures, including the access to affordable housing measure. Applicants must receive at least 80% of the points to receive the bonus points. And then we are proposing to remove the reference to the ACPs with 50% people of color. This, I know you've heard about this in past presentations with community development. This really is a phrasing that we're moving away from and trying to recognize the nuances that occur in areas of concentrated poverty. And so at this point, we will just have 3 tiers of bonus points, 25 points for areas of concentrated poverty, 15 points for census tracts that are above the regional average, either for poverty or for people of color, and then 10 bonus points for all other areas. I think that's the last slide. Next slide. And I can take any questions specifically related to the equity and affordable housing scoring.
Thanks for that presentation. There is a lot to absorb. You can tell that this is really thought out. One question before I forget is the bonus points. If you take off the qualifier with the 50% people of color, I understand that unfortunately concentrated poverty is very closely linked to the concentrations of people of color. But without going through different iterations, I'm not sure what the impact is going to be when you had the total of 45. I'm wondering if we should take those points up from 25 to 30 or 35 instead of what is being proposed. But just a question for people to think about. Any other questions from council members? I am not seeing none. Maybe they're absorbing as well.
Madam Chair, if I might, somewhat in response to your last suggestion, one thing, as I noted earlier, 11 projects received the bonus points and 10 of them were ultimately funded as part of the regional solicitation application. I think the one that was not funded missed it by 4 points. But generally, we saw that those points did make a difference last time. Oftentimes, regional solicitation projects by 1 or 2 points are on the cutoff line. And so for the 10 projects that were funded, those were very important points that I could let you know if it made a difference in their funding or not, whether they were funded, but it was a significant number of points for them.
Yeah, if you could provide that information back to our committee, before we have to make decisions, I think that would be very helpful. And that would also trigger them to look at this again if we don't get a whole lot of questions. I'm wondering if Chris has a question. I see you on camera.
Yeah, I just, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to, process-wise, this was voted on by the tab, right? So if the council actually wanted changes, we would need to send it back to the tab. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Madam Chair and members, at this point, the tab will be voting in September. I think September 15th is the date. So this information item is an opportunity for you as the council to send back comments that you would like them to consider in their adoption. So I would say if there is a desire that the bonus points move upward, we would need that direction at this point in time to bring that back to tab. The regional solicitation then is released for public comment, as Steve noted. There would be after that another opportunity for tab to change it again, either in response to public comment or messages from the council, and then final adoption is in December.
Thank you.
Anything else by any other council members? Do we have a slide on the negative points from before? What typical things drop down the points?
Madam Chair, I don't think we have the negative points on the slide. As a scorer, generally you thought about the benefits and then you kind of said, oh, is there anything negative? So in my instance, at least, it works better to think about them together. It's fairly difficult to come up with negative impacts and then assign points to that. I think we had one that I can think of in particular, but overall, there were not a lot of negative points that were ever assigned to any of the projects.
Okay, that's helpful to know. If we don't have any council members that feel something needs to change, we can go ahead and wait to see what tab's response is going to be. And that's in September, right?
Madam Chair, members, that's correct. I think given that Deb Barber is not here today, I think we should have a conversation with her, and that would be something she could bring up at the next tab meeting and suggest whether additional points should be given in the bonus range.
Okay, yeah, if you could do that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
If there's no opposition by our council members today. Looks like there is none, so yeah, please proceed with that. Okay, with that, that is our last information item. Do we have any? Oh, go ahead.
I think, Madam Chair, I think Steve has a couple of slides left remaining.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, we just had 3 slides left, and it's okay. We're kind of rounding out the presentation here, but so back on slide 19. Yep. So the two items that tab is still wants to spend some time on, I would say, is the modal funding ranges and the minimum and maximum awards. And we'll quickly go through those two. So next slide. So the modal funding ranges is something we put in the application to give applicants a general understanding of how much money is going to go to the different modes, roadways versus transit versus bicycle and pedestrian. And you can see what we've traditionally done up until 2018. In 2020, we did shift what amounts to about $5 million to transit. If you're looking at the midpoints here, so the midpoint went up from 27% for transit to 30%. And so we have roughly $200 million. So that's how we came up with about 5 million was the shift there. So this is one topic that I imagine is going to be discussed at length here at the September meeting, whether we should keep that for another round or two, the change we already made or change to something different. So that's one outstanding topic. As part of that too is the set aside for the unique projects. Next slide, please. The second is the minimum and maximum award, and we don't need to go through necessarily through those details. What happened on Thursday at our TAC funding and programming committee was one of the maximum awards that they did recommend for change was way at the bottom down there, pedestrian facilities. Second to last bullet point, currently the maximum award there is $1 million. Our funding and programming committee recommended increasing that to $2 million. So I'm sure that'll be something to be discussed also at TAB. So next slide, please. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on those last slides? Looks like there are none. It's a beautiful day outside, and I'm sure everybody's anxious to get out and about. So this meeting is now. Oh, did you have a question, Chris, or are you just going to get ready to say goodbye? This meeting is now adjourned.